All, as a friendly reminder, this meeting is being recorded. So just be mindful of that. Again, raise your hand if you want to talk. Today we've got a packed agenda, so I want to really get right into it. But before that, I want to say a quick hello to everybody and to my co-chair, Tisha Edwards, who's coming on. Hey, Tisha. And I know we are going to hear some presentations from folks today. I'm going to do the DEI portion on some of the policies that have shaped an inequitable city that we live in. And then we're going to have some time to work in groups and get our goals together. With that, hey, Tisha, do you want to say anything before we turn it over to our presenters?
Sure. Thank you, Councilman Cohen. I'm looking forward to a great meeting tonight. You know, I really enjoy, and my heart always grows as a result of our task force meetings. But I know that many of our task force members may be aware that I am leaving the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success at the end of the month and going on to another opportunity. But I did want to take this time to first and foremost just communicate how much I have loved my participation on the task force and co-leading the task force with you, Councilman Cohen. It has been probably one of the most fulfilling and learning experiences I've had directing the agency. And I'm really excited about the future ahead with the task force. And who knows, Councilman Cohen, I may submit an application to an open spot. So hopefully previous experience will get me a couple of points so that I can continue to be involved. But nonetheless, I just want to really express my gratitude and appreciation to every member of this task force. I've learned so much from you. I've loved every single presentation. And my heart is just warmed by the care and love that everyone has on this task force for our city. And I will continue to be a champion for Baltimore. I will continue to be a champion for all things trauma-informed care. So you can always count on me to be supporting this work. And I also just want to make everyone know that the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success is a strong agency. And we're excited about new leadership for the agency. And I'm very confident that the agency will continue to be a part of everything that is in support of children and youth and families in our city. So this has been a joy. I count it as one of my blessings. So thank you for the opportunity, Councilman Cohen. Thank you to this amazing task force. I hope to see each and every one of you in other paths. This has just been wonderful. This is not my last meeting. You cannot get rid of me until my very last day. And if you want to call a special meeting so I can do another meeting, I'm down for that too. So I will be here tonight, and I will also be here on the 21st. And I will be one of your faithful followers, always watching these meetings publicly as we go forward. So thank you, Councilman Cohen. I appreciate your partnership.
Thank you so much. Can we just give like a big virtual round of applause and love for my dear friend and our co-chair, Tisha Edwards, who is going on to great things and is going to do awesome in her next role. But I do just want to say, in the spirit of giving Tisha her roses, that, you know, there was a really precarious moment, not everybody knows, where, you know, the city was facing some like really heavy stuff in between a mayoral transition, a ransomware attack, a global pandemic that shut down the entire world. And Tisha was an absolute force in keeping the city together, in standing up a massive citywide feeding program, in bringing on hotels online so that our neighbors that are experiencing homelessness would have somewhere to be. And in basically like adopting a whole nother agency that wasn't even her own, all the while still running the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success and being an awesome partner on the Trauma Informed Care Task Force. So, all the love in the world to Director Edwards, and just appreciate everything that you've done. And I know this is not the last meeting, but just want to show some love on this one. So
Love
anyway.
accepted, Councilman Cohen. Thank you so much.
Good. All right. So I'm going to turn it over to Ann. We're going to do some quick round the horn and a one-on-one thing, and then we're going to get right into people's presentations.
All right. It is going to be real quick tonight because it is jam-packed tonight. So we're going to break into partners and just share name, pronoun, and one thing that you are grateful for this week. So it will literally be like 2 minutes. So I'm opening up all the rooms. If you could go ahead and join your breakout room, that would be great. All right. Mark. My name's Ann. Oh, Mark's leaving. Colby, can you hear me okay? Hey, Mark, I pulled you back here because Colby can't either get to that room or is having some technical difficulties. So, hi, Mark.
How you feeling?
Good. How are you?
Wonderful. I am still elated and energized after that Tuesday's journey to the Cambridge, Maryland, man, and that energy and the potential of helping. Again, my family has been there since the late 1800s. So to know that now it's going to be intentional and impactful work that can move the needle forward for them. I'm humbled to be a part. So, you know me, if I need to sweep, I'm sweeping. If I need to speak, I'll speak. Whatever you need me to do, I'm on it.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. And
I was paired up with Colby, my guy Colby.
Yeah, we got Colby, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they're able to have the. I don't know if their tech is working. So,
oh man,
Colby, you want to share something you're grateful for this week? If you can hear me.
I don't hear.
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna work out.
Oh, there we go. Oh, that's Corey. Corey, what's happening?
Hey, family, how you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Oh, look, listen, I don't know if you know, but Miss Danielle Crawford, you need to meet her if you haven't, bro. She is special. She's special. Super bright, bro. Super bright.
Okay. Cool. Outstanding. Whenever we can set it up, let's do it.
Okay, definitely. Hey, Miss Danielle, I'm sorry for putting you on the spot like that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. So welcome back. I do also want to just give a quick hello to some new folks. I think Danielle was here at our last one, but Danielle is doing a fellowship with my office. She's a fellow in a social work program at the Great Morgan State. So welcome, Danielle, as well as Iris, who is also going to be working with us. And she is doing a Leadership for Educational Equity Fellowship. So welcome, Iris, also to the Trauma Informed Care Task Force. With that, we are going to go right into presentations. And if you don't mind going first, William Calibre, since I know you are, since we work so closely together anyway, do you mind going first on this?
No, I do not mind. I'm
Awesome.
good to go.
All right, your mic is yours, my friend.
Oh, it's mine already. Okay. Everybody, hello to everyone on the task force tonight, and I'm very, very honored and very grateful to have the opportunity to tell you a little bit about who I am. My name is William Calibre. I'm currently the director for the Office of Youth and Trauma Services at the Baltimore City Health Department, but I'm also what I call a global advocate for victims of crime. A lot of the work that I have done before I came to the health departments 5 or more years ago was really focused either in DC or in different parts of the country, as well as other countries that I've been able to work with doing this work around violence prevention or addressing trauma. So I'd like to start with a little bit of a video and then come back and talk for about 2 minutes. And the video is about 2 minutes. So that would give me about a good 5 minutes to do this. So I'm going to share my screen. And can everybody see that? Good. Okay.
Joined now by William Calibre, a gun safety advocate with a long history of dealing with gun violence. Thanks for coming in tonight.
Well, thanks for having me on it.
Yeah, and I don't really want to make this a discussion about whether people should or shouldn't have guns, because that can go in a whole other direction. I just want to talk about how parents can begin the conversation about guns and safety with their children.
They're waiting. They're not sure if there's a standoff going on. They're not hearing a response. And you're communicating to them, hey, my mom and my brother are in there. My brother may still be alive.
Thank God for my grandmother, because she was another female who stepped in and really made it happen for me.
Joining me now are two people with a very personal stake. At age 10, William Calibre watched his mother's ex-boyfriend shoot and kill his mother and brother. He shared that story last week with the Vice President's Task Force on Gun Violence.
Well, thank you. First of all, my heart goes out to the victims and survivors of Newtown, but also to victims and survivors all across our country where the violence is playing out on the streets every day.
One thing that I think I take away from William's story is the resilience of the human spirit.
William was absolutely incredible. I think he did an incredible job taking us through that, about how he has about his grandma, how families change as a result of the story gives a real base to what it is that children who witness abuse experience, the lifetime that it takes to be able to heal. And so it helps us to understand all of those different connections in a real way.
Just wanted to stop it there. It's interesting how I kind of ended up here in Baltimore City. My grandmother lived here in the 50s. She came from Washington, D.C. She came with her boyfriend then at that time, my mom's dad. And my mother was actually born at Maryland University Hospital back when it was called that in the 50s. And so I believe it was called that name back in the day, the Trauma Center. My grandmother was in a domestic violence situation. My grandfather and he had been abusing her, and she left town. She left Baltimore. She actually lived, every time I bring her to Baltimore, she says, Pennsylvania Avenue. So she used to live in the Sandtown, Winchester area. And so she left Baltimore and went back to DC. She put a pot of beans on the stove, and she left while my grandfather was at work, never to return to the city. And she left in Washington, D.C. and raised her children. And later on, my mom would get into a relationship as well. And we witnessed my mom and our whole family go through a very horrible ordeal for 7 months with her ex-boyfriend, who would then kill her in 1984. And of course, I put that probably in the back of my mind, but we know that this just doesn't go to the back of our minds. Grappling with that kind of trauma over the course of my teenage life, where I experienced suicidal ideation and I just wanted to give up. I didn't want to be here. And so it was a battle to try to get back to a place, or get to a place where I felt safe on earth. And so I went to the restaurant business for 9 years. After that, I went to college at age 27. And somehow on the college campus, where things can happen, where young people always are part of those movements, like Congressman John Lewis, young people are a part of, the Arab Spring, so many movements across the world. And so I got into the movement around domestic violence. I had a god sister who was killed, and she was stabbed over 50 times by her ex-boyfriend, who had got broken out of a halfway house or a facility, and found her. And that started me on my pathway, because I basically said enough is enough. And so I started this major campaign called the Sleep Out for Peace, and would sleep out on the streets, raising awareness. And so it garnered the attention of many individuals, such as Congressman Lewis and others, who began to partner around the issue of violence prevention. And so my career has been dedicated to start off as a community organizer on these issues. And my career has been all about that, really addressing these issues. And so I've been grateful to have not just a local platform in my birth city in Washington, D.C., but also here in Baltimore. I've traveled back and forth to Baltimore all my life. My first real adult relationship was dating someone who lived in Baltimore. So I was coming back and forth to Baltimore. So I was very familiar with Baltimore over a long period of time. But I'm really glad that I really had this opportunity to come to Baltimore 5 years ago to do the work and continue the work, but in systems. And I realized that while as a community organizer, as a community-based organization, grassroots person, jumping into a city government was a complete different swing of things, completely different, where I've experienced, the bureaucracy, the structural oppression, but also the opportunities that we have. Because a person like me, who has the experience from grassroots organization or not-for-profit organizations, to come into the city administration and try to move mountains. I haven't given up. I'm still there, and I see myself as a barrier mover, if you will, in systems. And so I think we always need people who are able to relate to community and be able to move mountains, because that's what sometimes it takes. But everything's possible, and healing is possible. So I'm glad to be a part of this movement to make Baltimore City a trauma-informed city. So that's a little bit about me. 5 minutes probably doesn't do a lot, but hopefully you know me a little bit more than you did a moment ago. Thank you.
Awesome. Please give it up for my friend, William Calibre. Great office that he runs, the Office of Youth and Trauma Services in the Health Department, and just an awesome, amazing partner in this work. So thank you. Thanks for all you do. And thanks for your story as well.
Thank you.
All right, rock and roll. Let's hear from Director Janet Abrahams next. My apologies. Did I catch you eating?
No, sorry. I was having
that's the rule. That's the rule. You can everyone.
I was having a jelly bean. I apologize. Good evening, everyone. And thank you for inviting me to this task force. And it has been a great experience, and I want to thank you for that. And I have met some wonderful people. Not being from Baltimore, met some really serious individuals that's extremely serious about what they do and the services they provide. And so I'm happy to see that, because, as a houser, as we call ourselves, I didn't start out in housing. I started out in this business as a social worker. I did, as a social worker, I graduated from Norfolk State University in Virginia. And I am originally Jamaican, born and raised. I came to the United States when I was 9 years old. And always wanted to be in the service industry and try to figure out what could I do to make sure that I give back. But I also wanted to understand certain things that happened in my world. And I thought that social work would be the perfect route, but it really wasn't. I ended up doing different things in the industry. So I have a presentation that I will use to share my journey. And I have 5 minutes, so just give me an opportunity to go through this. I did want to start out by saying I am a Avatar kind of fan, and my team created an image of me that they're using to present to our staff different policies and procedures, because I can't be everywhere. So I will start out with my little avatar screen. So give me an opportunity to bring that up. And so let's see where we are. Okay. I'm hoping you all can see this. I didn't think it would be this slow. I apologize. Can you see the screen?
No, we're seeing your email.
It's opening up. I'm sorry. It's downloading. So I apologize. Just give me 1 second. All right. Can you see that now? Yes? Just a thumbs up.
We only see your email. So when you shared the screen, you may have selected just that window.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Share. How about now?
No.
You might have to stop sharing and reshare. You have to unshare, make sure it's up, and then share it when it's open.
Okay, so stop sharing. I apologize, everybody. I thought I had it.
We all do the same mistakes. No problem.
But I thought I had it. So let me stop sharing.
And then go on and make sure it's opened up.
It's open.
And then you should be able to go back on to share again, and then just click on it, and it should come up. Yep.
Are you seeing it now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
Okay. All right, let's see how this works. Abraham from the Housing Authority of Baltimore. So that's my avatar that they all created. And so I start, as I mentioned, I came to America when I was 9 years old. I won't tell you what year that was. And I began my career as a social worker. I worked for the Housing Authority. I worked for DCFS in Hartford, Connecticut. I was a social worker specializing in incest. That was my specialty. Had to go through a lot of training to really understand that world. And through that, I ended up working from 1992 till 2001, when I relocated to Chicago. And in Chicago, I started out working for Volunteers of America and working with Volunteers of America as a social worker. And one of the things that I learned in Chicago when I moved there, this is before they started their plan for transformation and when they had all the many high rises. I started working in the high rises in Chicago, specifically Rockwell Gardens and Stateway. And for those of you who know Chicago, you know those are some of the most notorious, and Cabrini Green, some of the most notorious projects that they had there. And I decided at some point that I wanted to move and start working with the Housing Authority, because I felt like I could do more work there and really work with the families that I met through VOA and see how I can make their lives better. I began my career in public housing in 2001 as the Assistant Director of Operations. I did go into that kicking and screaming. The Housing Authority of Chicago at the time were considered troubled, and they were asked by HUD to create a model that would take them off the troubled housing list, but also address the long-term deferred maintenance needs and what have you. So they created the asset management division. And in that asset management division, my job was to create a program that became a national model to change the direct management of public housing to private management. And that's where I was able to start my career in Chicago. I worked in Chicago for many years, and one day I was contacted by a headhunter that asked me if I was interested in moving from Chicago. At the time, I wasn't interested. And each department had its own attorney. And what happened, the attorney and my staff created a resume for me and sent it off to the headhunter without my knowledge. And I was contacted and asked to go to Newark, New Jersey for an interview to become the chief of operations. I took the bait, and I went to Newark, where I was interviewed and hired. And in Newark, again, housing authorities at the time, they were direct managing their portfolio. And it really became a disaster over the years because of the long-term deferred maintenance. And of course, the image that the housing authority had in the community. So the optics was very bad, especially in Newark. And so the national model that I created in Chicago was one of the reasons why they hired me in Newark. And so I was able to move to Newark, New Jersey, and expound on that national model. And through that model, I was able to work with Nan McKay and all the industry groups to create a training academy so that people can really understand what it is to manage public housing. But at the same time, I don't think a lot of people realize that if you do not manage the housing authorities to the goals and standards set by HUD, that you become troubled. And so Newark Housing Authority was a troubled agency. And my directive at the time was that I had 1 year to remove them from the troubled list. I removed that agency within 8 months from the troubled list and was able to really move the agency in the right direction. I then left from Newark. And of course, in 2015, I went to NYCHA, the largest housing authority in the country. And I was hired there because they wanted me to run Next Gen Operations. And so Next Gen Operations is a model that housing authorities are now using, where they decentralize all their functionalities and send out the functions to the sites, so that the site managers can manage more appropriately and of course address the needs, because they know what's happening on those sites. And managing those sites, especially New York City, we had in New York, it's 173,000 units that you have and over 600,000 residents. So it's really the largest in the country. And so this particular model, they gave me a $70 million budget and asked me to implement this model across several of the boroughs. And so I was able to successfully implement the program. But one of the things that happened with housing authorities is that when you create different models, they always change and bring in new administration who think their model is better. And so I know they're expounding on this model in New York, but they're also creating other avenues. So you're always kind of constantly moving across the country with different models. You start the model and then someone comes in and do something different. I was really proud of the work that I did in New York. And that was the catalyst for me moving here to Baltimore. So I came to Baltimore in 2017 to run the housing authority here. And for those of you who are familiar with the agency, it used to be Baltimore Housing. It was one agency that they had one commissioner that ran DHCD, Department of Housing and Community Development, but they also ran the Housing Authority. And one of the things that Mayor Pugh at the time recognized was that the Housing Authority was not getting the attention that it deserved. And the Housing Authority on its own is a federally funded property. It is not funded through the city. It is an independent agency that is not part of the city. And so one of the things that I had to do was to rebrand the agency and give it its own individuality. And at the same time, try to figure out how to change the platform, the financial platform for some of the properties to a different platform because of the long-term deferred maintenance, those properties became obsolete. And so I had to really dive in and try to create a different agency, but at the same time, figure out how to get the employees to buy into this new strategy and become part of this new model that I was introducing here in the city. One of the things that I've always talked about and say to folks, my strategy and coming into new organizations is never an easy road. It's always hard. It's a difficult task. And sometimes, it's a lonely process, but you meet great people. I have traveled all over the place. My last stint, they sent me to the Puerto Rico Housing Authority because of what happened with the storm there, because they wanted me to introduce this model and to talk with them about how to get beyond the tragedy that happened there. So it was great to be part of that rebranding and remodeling in Puerto Rico. And we all, the Housing Authority in Baltimore City is the 5th largest in the country, believe it or not. And you have New York, you have Puerto Rico, Chicago, Philadelphia, and then you have Baltimore. And so people really take stock of some of the things that we're doing here in Baltimore. And we are really putting this agency on the map so that people can understand there's a right way and a wrong way to address our residents. So my hope is that as we continue to rebrand, remodel, reshape the organization, but also bring in the social programs necessary to help our families, which we're doing through the Plan for Transformation, it's very important for us to really have a holistic approach to what we're doing. So we're really focusing on people, we're focusing on neighborhood, and we're focusing on the housing aspect of this. And so with all that said, I wanted to introduce you all to, and so these are just some of the different activities that I have done across the agencies. And at the end of this, I want to introduce you to the one thing in my life that is consistent. I want you to meet Smash. Smash is the one thing that consistently has been part of my life. You have to give him credit. The poor little thing has moved from state to state and continues to be one of the most consistent pieces that I look forward to on a daily basis. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Please give a big, big, big round of virtual applause to our friend, Director Janet Abrahams, who I'm really glad you came to Baltimore. It's been good partnership having you here. And one thing I just want to appreciate about you is that you really show up. And I mean that because I love having all the agencies that are represented. We have amazing representatives, but I think you're the only one, aside from Tisha, agency head who's come to every single one of these meetings, and I think is really trying to learn about trauma-informed care in an agency that needs it. So I thank you and appreciate your showing up and your work. So with that, we are now going to pass it to Abby Cook to tell us a bit about Abby.
Hey, thank you so much, Councilman. It's actually Cock. The E is silent. It's Old English.
Apologies, Abby Cock.
Thank you. It's helped me build character over the years, so that's something about me.
Right.
Yeah. So I want to say congratulations and thank you to Director Edwards. And I want to say also how deeply appreciative I am to be on this task force. My name is Abby Koch. I'm an environmental planner in the Baltimore Office of Sustainability. We are part of the city's Department of Planning. And if you knew my colleague Annika Richter, who went to grad school at Harvard last month, I am her replacement on the task force. And I'm here because our office leads an interagency public-private coalition called Baltimore Connecting Children to Nature. And one of our major strategies in that initiative, in addition to green schoolyards and green jobs, is around policy and programming for using nature for healing and strengthening connections between early childhood, environmental education, and the health and mental health fields, because the data around the healing power of nature is so strong, and we're seeing such success in programs that are using it. And we've worked with the Office of Youth and Trauma Services, with city schools, with Recreation and Parks and Public Works, and just it's really been tremendous. But I'm not supposed to be talking about the work, I'm supposed to be talking about who I am. So who am I other than enthusiastic about said work? So I'm a public servant and a communicator. And I appreciate being asked because it made me think about how to sum it up. So I was born in Philly, but my parents moved to Woodlawn just outside the city on the west side because my dad had gotten his first professional job out of college at the Social Security Administration. And he worked there until he retired just a few years ago. And at the end of his career, he was working in government and legislative affairs and had been for a long time. My mom wore many hats. She was a librarian, a teacher, a social worker in both the foster care system and then with the city's Office of Public Defender, a therapist, and she's now becoming a pastoral counselor. So I love them very much, but I never intended to follow in my parents' footsteps, but I've ended up very much doing so, making a career in government, in communications, and working with people. I've been really shaped, I would say, by being on like the borders of different places and finding my place in that. Growing up, literally a 5-minute walk from the city line on the county side in a red brick row house neighborhood, but at the same time having a very different experience than kids who lived near me. It was very confusing to me, and people would talk about Baltimore. And I wasn't sure what it was, because sometimes they meant me and my neighbors and family, in an area. And sometimes they're like, oh no, we mean Baltimore, Baltimore, Baltimore City. It's like, what? And to me, the city was, all the best things, the aquarium and the science center and the Walters and the BMA and the JCC. So it's the white L with a Jewish twist, which also describes my ethnic background. So yeah, I went to, UMBC, I majored in environmental studies. I figured, why not get a career helping the world? That sounds fulfilling, however it ends up working out. I've had a very straightforward career in a way. I minored in writing. My first job was with the Parks and People Foundation, and I wrote case studies of Friends of the Parks group. And I got around to all the little corners of the city and got to meet amazing people. And it's just gotten better from there. So many like gardeners and urban farmers and community greeners and educators and super dedicated parents, people, using meditation and yoga and eliminating the need for suspensions in schools, people integrating arts and connecting deeply to nature, into the lives of young people in ways that are proven, to reduce stress, and that really show, in the anecdotes they have about their work with these kids. And, certainly in experiences I've had as well, but in a way it's been most powerful for me vicariously, like trying to support teachers. So yeah, that's who I am. I love Baltimore very much. I got it tattooed on me. I'm in it to win it. And I guess one more thing I'll say, and I'm gonna stop. I moved through a lot of social environments as a kid. I went to a very diverse public elementary school in Woodlawn. Then I went to a private Jewish middle school, and it was very jarring. Then I went to a magnet arts high school in Towson, and that was really cool. So I feel like I've had to learn to communicate with all different types of people. And that's what I try to do here for the city of Baltimore. Okay, I'm done. Thank you for listening.
Awesome. Please give a big round of applause to Abby, who is a really good storyteller and actually also uses social media really well. If you ever follow Abby's stuff, it tells a really interesting story, and I appreciate it. And also does good advocacy while naming some things that are uncomfortable. So
thank you, Zeke. Yeah, I actually meant to say I'm involved in local theater and local activism around victims of police violence and advocating around their issues. Yeah, thank you.
awesome. All right, amazing. So great, William, Abby, Janet, great to have you on this task force. I am now going to turn it over to Fariha to introduce our DEI.
Good evening, everyone. Happy Thursday. Thank you for being here. Fariha here. I have the pleasure of introducing Councilman Cohen actually for today's DEI topic. And it's going to be on a history of public policies that have led to a segregated and deeply traumatized Baltimore. And I just want to say this topic is really near and dear to my heart. I'm a teacher. I've been teaching for many years. When I first started teaching, I'll be honest with you all, I had no idea of like how much local policy actually impacted the decision-making that happens in my classroom and my students and families' lives. And it was actually Councilman Cohen who looped me into this policy advocacy work through trainings that he led that taught me to community organize, that helped me really find my voice and show up for learning more about this and figuring out how to support a more equitable Baltimore. So thank you so much, Zeke. Really appreciate all of your knowledge, and I can't wait to learn more from you tonight.
Awesome. That's very kind of you to say. Thank you, Fariha. All right, I am very not adept with technology, so this may or may not work. All right, we're going to do desktop, screen share. All right, now ready? Okay, can everybody see the thing? Give me a thumbs up.
Yes, we can.
Amazing. Okay. All right, so I'm going to present Trauma-Informed Care Task Force, Understanding the Roots of Racial Trauma in Baltimore's Public Policies. Please know this is not a totally comprehensive look through Baltimore. It would take a really long time to do that, but I wanted to share a little bit of how we got here to the place that we are in. A lot of this is shaped by the following 4 books, which I highly recommend if you have not read. Antero Piatila's Not in My Neighborhood, Lawrence Brown's Black Butterfly, Howell Baum, Brown in Baltimore, David Blight, Frederick Douglass, Prophet of Freedom, and also Baltimore Heritage, which is a just really good historical base of different articles that have been captured over the years. So I think it's important to situate in, as we think about racial inequity in Baltimore, where are we currently at? There is a 20-year life expectancy gap between children growing up in Roland Park and Sandtown Winchester. There's a 31% white to Black home ownership gap. The unemployment rate is 3 times higher for Black people than white people in Baltimore. And the median income rates were half that of whites for African Americans in Baltimore. And what I really want to sort of stress is that these statistics are not random or are not the fate of the market or anything like that, but the result of apartheid policies and strategies that have been consistent throughout Baltimore's history. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So we go all the way back to the Civil War. Before the Civil War, Baltimore had both free Blacks and enslaved Black people, including Frederick Douglass, living in it. Douglass would eventually escape from Baltimore on the B&O Railroad and then later return to purchase 5 homes in Fells Point, which he rented out to African Americans. But again, pre-Civil War, Baltimore has free Black folks and enslaved Black people. Baltimore has often been called the northernmost city or the southernmost southern city or the southernmost northern city. Maryland is a divided state on slavery and secession. Baltimore is divided as we head into the Civil War. And I think to this day, there's almost this schism within our city where we both want to be very, very traditional and segregated, but also more progressive and resistant. So on April 19th, 1861, Union troops marching to Washington from Massachusetts were attacked by a mob of angry Baltimoreans during the Pratt Street riot. So again, Baltimoreans literally pelting Union troops, throwing rocks at them. So you can see this Confederate sympathizing vibe that existed within our city, which again was a slave city. Following the riot, President Abraham Lincoln suspended the writ of habeas corpus between Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia to give military authorities the necessary power to silence dissenters and rebels. Chief Justice Taney, at the time a notorious racist, ruled that Lincoln did not have the authority to suspend habeas corpus, and thus begins the Civil War. So it is arguably a true story that the Civil War really starts in Baltimore, which I think is a really interesting fact. And it was Baltimoreans attacking Union soldiers as they marched through that precipitates the Civil War. So moving forward, and I'm going to move relatively quickly. If you have a question, shout it out. I'll give some time at the end. Or if there's anything you want to correct, please jump in. In 1910, we're going to talk about Baltimore apartheid policies. Mayor John Mahul signs the first residential racial zoning law in the country, which created separate housing for Blacks, whites, and Jews, right? So 1910, we are the first city in America to legislate residential segregation. That law was replicated all over the place. And the mayor at the time argued that whites and Blacks could not live together in peace, and Black homeowners would appreciate housing values for white people. The first Black person to integrate into a white zone block was George McMetchen. Also, he happened to be the first baccalaureate of McMecken. He moved to all-white McCullough Street in 1910. And in 1910, the McCullough Improvement Association, which was a community association, fought back and proceeded to throw bricks through Mr. McMetchen's window. And again, almost another riot ensues. That is George McMetchen, class of 1895. In 1917, the Supreme Court in Buchanan versus Worley struck down residential segregation laws, barring whites from selling to Blacks as unconstitutional. So again, 1910, Baltimore starts this wave of cities legislating residential segregation, creating different tracts of housing for different groups of people. In 1917, the Supreme Court says you can't do that, but Baltimore finds a way, and Mayor Preston, who's the next mayor, uses some public health arguments to advocate for removing Black people out of Baltimore so that they don't spread disease. In 1918, Mayor Preston convened a secret meeting to convince Black city leaders to voluntarily accept segregation, and it did not work. Again, all of this can be found in Dr. Lawrence Brown's excellent book, The Black Butterfly. And just to be really clear, residential segregation allowed an economic system to develop that gave major advantages to white people in the real estate market and allowed public amenities to disproportionately go toward white neighborhoods. Again, it's important to recognize that this is not just about like, okay, white people over here, Black people over here, Jews over here. This is about targeting public resources into white neighborhoods while depriving Black neighborhoods of same. This is also about making sure credit and home loans and mortgages go toward white neighborhoods. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But it's also really important to recognize that this was a all-in movement toward white supremacy. It involved politicians, our newspapers, Apologies to Director Abrahams. She was not around at the time, but our housing authority, community, and civic associations all colluded to enforce residential apartheid. Mob violence was also used as a tool to discourage Black people from moving into white neighborhoods. As I mentioned with George McMetchin, that his house was attacked, and we would see that pattern play out repeatedly moving forward. So newspapers, the role of the media, I think, is really important in shaping narrative and in shaping how we think about stories. White newspapers in Baltimore spread headlines and articles stoking fears about Black individuals and colleges moving into white neighborhoods. They also published the homes where Black residents moved in, which put them in imminent danger from white violence. This was a headline from the Baltimore Sun in 1917 about Lorville opposing Morgan State moving its campus closer. So let's talk about community associations, which again have a dark, dark history within our city that I think is underappreciated in how we currently think about neighborhood associations. They were used to reinforce and retrench segregation. So after 1917, after the Supreme Court determines that our 1910 law legally segregating people is unconstitutional, neighborhood associations in Baltimore developed their own racial housing covenants. These barred Blacks and often Jews and sometimes immigrants from buying homes within certain communities. This is a really famous example, the Roland Park Company deed and agreement. This was a pamphlet that was distributed that created essentially codified the Roland Park Association's racial housing covenant, which again barred Black people and Jewish people from buying a home there. HABC, again, unfortunately not a proud history in our city and frankly in much of our country. The Housing Authority of Baltimore was formed in 1937 to funnel federal dollars into public housing. Most public housing is constructed around World War II to provide opportunities for veterans and their families. And so again, we're going to see a concentration of the best public housing going toward white soldiers and their white families. We're going to see less quality going toward Black soldiers and Black families, and often Black folks were excluded from public housing in the 1930s and 40s altogether. In Baltimore, HABC was immediately segregated, with Douglass homes, McCullough, and Poe homes designated for Black people, while Perkins, Latrobe, and several others were designated for white people. And again, the white public housing was far better maintained. Jana Abraham spoke about deferred maintenance. We see that play out across public housing, but just resources are not going into Black public housing in the way that they are for white public housing. So in 1943, all public housing for Black vets and their families would move to South and Southeast Baltimore, Cherry Hill, Lakeland, et cetera. And then in the 1950s, we start to see high-rise public housing, Lafayette Courts, et cetera, gets created. So instead of like communities, there's like these very tall buildings, which again, go largely neglected. And this is a picture of several years later, Lafayette Courts being demolished. Let's talk about redlining. Most folks have heard that term. Across the country, the Homeowners Loan Corporation assessed quality of neighborhoods in order to determine whether banks should issue federally backed loans and mortgages. And they would map the data using color codes, green for best, as in like safe investment, and you should provide a loan over here, and red for hazardous and high risk. Again, so the Homeowner Loan Corporation would take a map of a city, and they would literally take a pen and look at the different neighborhoods and do green on the ones where they wanted banks to lend and do red on the ones where they didn't. And so guess what? Majority red neighborhoods would not be able to get traditional loans, instead would rely on predatory contract buying, which I'll talk about in 1 second. And one of the criteria straight out of the Homeowner Loan Corporation's documents was threat of infiltration of foreign-born, N-word, or lower grade population. So that is one of the criteria that they're using to determine their map. And it was actually the dominant criteria. So again, the more Black, immigrant, Jewish, non-white folks in a neighborhood, the less likely that neighborhood is going to be able to attract public and private capital. This is a map from 1939. Again, you can begin to see the contours of the white L and the black butterfly. But, best, Roland Park, North Baltimore, all these areas, and then really the center and the east and the west with that little butterfly thing is where they are deemed hazardous and not to loan to those areas. And so just real clear, with a traditional mortgage, you have a fixed rate, you pay it every year, the bank backs your loan, the bank pays toward the house, you pay off some portion of it. However, with a contract, what you get is no guarantee of principal until the entire thing is paid off. So you don't own any of it until the whole thing gets paid off. And the contract seller can charge whatever interest rate they want. And so if I'm making payments to Fariha on a contract that she sold to me, and let's say my interest rate starts at 5%, then maybe she kicks it up to 10%, then 15%. At some point, I'm going to default. I'm not going to be able to make my payments. And guess what? I have accumulated zero equity in the loan. And so I completely forfeit the entire thing and go into bankruptcy. Moving forward, let's talk about subprime lending, which has also been called reverse redlining. So in the 2000s in Baltimore, banks and realtors engaged in what we call subprime lending, where they would prey on people, primarily Black, with limited income and credit for subprime loans. Instead of a fixed rate, there's an adjustable arm. So these loans look great at first blush. It's like the zero down, very small interest rates. But when you read the fine print, you see that instead of a fixed rate, traditional 20-year federally backed loan, what you're going to pay is what's called an ARM, which is going to go up and up and up and up. So again, folks would get in with no credit history needed, but the interest rates begin to almost immediately balloon. And after a few months, people realize that they're completely underwater, that they don't own, they've been making these payments, but they don't actually own barely any of the house. They're just paying interest, and they're going into debt very, very, very quickly and can't afford to keep up. And there are stories of realtors going into Black churches and acting as like normal parishioners and luring people into these subprime loans. So in 2008, Baltimore successfully sues Wells Fargo Bank, which was the #1 perpetrator in Baltimore of subprime lending, for $125 million. And also in 2008, the housing bubble, which the whole ethos then had been everybody should buy a house, really starting with Bill Clinton and then going through George W. Bush, like this ownership society idea where everybody needs a house and everybody needs to own their house. Well, the problem is all of this is built on these subprime loans that get bundled together and then sold off to Wall Street. And basically the whole thing is a mirage. So in 2008, the housing bubble burst across the country, causing a massive recession. You all remember it. And entire neighborhoods, primarily Black, are financially devastated in Baltimore. People who had accumulated wealth no longer have wealth. This is a reasonably good illustration of kind of what this looks like. You think you're just getting a house, but you've also got these layers of brokers who are selling from banks. You have appraisers, and all the way above, you have Wall Street and hedge funds and securities who are swapping these things, these derivatives across the market, and eventually the entire thing collapses. A few other policies, which I'm not going to get into, but are worth highlighting: blockbusting, where folks are essentially, realtors come into a neighborhood and say there's going to be a ton of Black people buying this neighborhood, you should get out now. And so it causes everybody to flood the neighborhood, and the neighborhood, they then sell at outrageously high prices to Black families, and folks again get stuck in debt. Highway construction, the highway to nowhere, is our most famous monstrosity here in Baltimore. Urban renewal, the war on drugs and mass incarceration. Of course, Daniel talked about school segregation in the previous one, but again, pretty much any mechanism known to man to both segregate and extract wealth and plunder wealth from Black and non-white people has been pioneered, I would say, in this very town. Also important, really important to note, there is a powerful and strong resistance to racism throughout Baltimore's history. Frederick Douglass, again, is kind of where we started. He becomes the leading voice, or at least one of the leading voices, on abolition. The entire Mitchell family, Juanita, and the whole Mitchell crew at the NAACP, who are advocating primarily for resources in Black schools and then desegregation. Walter P. Carter, who establishes CORE in 1968 to 72. The Black Panther Party is in Baltimore. In the 1960s, there was some really powerful organizing among Black women in public housing for tenants' rights and for better conditions. In the 1970s, after the death of Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, many of the Black clergy in this town, Bishop Douglas Miles, who recently passed away, Marvin Bascom, et cetera, organize and create BUILD to advocate and sort of keep the movement of the civil rights moving forward. Real quick, 1954, CORE and Morgan students organized this sit-in at Reed's department store, and they are successful. And there's some amazing photographs. I don't have time to show all of them, but of them sitting there and ultimately integrating Reed's. All right, so our opportunity, and this is where I want to end, is that we, I think, in this moment are uniquely positioned to build a Baltimore that is anti-racist and rejects prejudice of all forms, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, anti-Asian, anti-Muslim hate. I think we are just incredibly well positioned to do that work. And that has to start with an understanding, and really, to me, as a policymaker, like a clear understanding of the policy mechanisms that have been used in the past to cause harm, and that we should be moving toward repair or reparations for what has been done. I want to end just on a really personal note that it is an absolute honor to get to do this work with you all. I was a public school teacher and then worked in a nonprofit for a bit, but never really thought that I would get to be part of this kind of task force where it is just amazing people who are working from all fields and avenues to make our city live up to its promise. And it is just a great, great, great pleasure to get to do this work, and to get to have Baltimore be the first city in America, both to have legislated residential segregation, but now to legislate trauma-informed care and healing across our city. So again, appreciate it. Thank you, Fariha. I don't know how much time that was, and I know it may have been a little bit long, but I'm going to end there. And if anyone has any questions or thoughts, thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Zeke. That was really amazing, and it really grounds me and inspires me to continue doing this work with you all. I also want to acknowledge that this is traumatizing. It's a traumatizing topic. It impacts us all differently. Many of you who might be watching might have actually been personally impacted by this for generations. So I also just want to acknowledge that if you need a moment, if you need to turn off your camera, get up, do something else for a few minutes, you definitely have that flexibility. And I also just want to take a deep breath with all of you to move us into our committee work for today. So let's take a deep breath, everyone. Thank you so much, Councilman Cohen.
Thank you. All right. Again, thank you all. Appreciate it. And again, thank you, Fariha, for creating the diversity, equity, inclusion space. Thank you, Nika, for jumping in a bunch on the chat with all the historical knowledge. There is so much there, and we could keep going for days. But appreciate you all giving me a space to do this. Now really excited. I know we've only got 22 minutes, but to get to our work groups, and we may not quite be there by the end of this meeting. I think probably at our next one, but really want to get to a space where we're honing in on our goals and almost there. So with that, I'm gonna ask Anne to bloop us to where we need to go, and I'll see you all soon.
So the group that's staying here is the decolonizing work group. So there will be a group that's staying here so that there's broadcast out onto our live feed, and so that there's something being recorded that can be then shared. The dynamic's a little tricky if people are struggling to move out of here to get to their room, but I would say given the time, decolonizing group, and Zeke, why don't you go ahead and start the conversation around supporting other groups, and I'll work on supporting getting people to their breakout rooms.
Thanks, Anne. Hey, everybody. So I know since we're supposed to start, that was the direction where I try to follow directions. I think it's important. So I'm actually on the way to the hospital. My father is in the hospital. So I will be in motion, and there may be a point where I will have to leave, but I tried to stay as long as I could so I can at least get us started with the conversation. Yeah. And you'll hear all of the things happening as a result of the fact that we're going to the hospital. So Zeke was really excited. The last few meetings have been really central around us trying to get clarity around what we mean when we say decolonizing, and how to seat ourselves. Hold on, can y'all get in the car? And how to seat ourselves Emar, mommy's coming, baby. Okay, let me go to the kitchen. I'm coming. Okay. We try to seat ourselves in a way where we're both addressing the sort of collective need across the city, so that we can support the implementation of resources and tools to hold institutions accountable, while also recognizing that one of the things that you and I talked about in the early stages was how to support other task force committees and being able to ensure that the things that they are presenting are also in alignment with what it means to work from a decolonial frame, and recognizing that a lot of folks, that this is new language for folks, and how can we create like a system or process that will allow us to make good on that. So I'm wondering your thoughts. I'm wondering if Jasmine, Monica, David, I can't see everybody that's left. If there anything that I missed, and Zeke, if you could sort of just share what you've been thinking from the time that we talked to now, especially alongside the pulse of what other folks feel like they will need.
Happy to. Does anyone else want to just jump in? And sorry to hear about your dad, Shauna. Sorry about that. Jasmine, Monica, anyone else want to jump in, and then I can just go for a bit?
No, echoing Zeke, I'm sorry to hear about your dad, Shauna. I think Shauna summed it up pretty well. That was where we left off with the discussion the last time.
Yeah, I think also understanding what's the context and the idea that you all have will help us refine our goals. Because I was reading that, and I would like to discuss that if we have time.
Great. So I think two things. One is I absolutely think, and we had talked about this early on, that your group has the opportunity to serve as I don't want to say check, because that doesn't quite track, but to serve as a frame for how other groups can do their work, and to help shape both the statements that are coming out, because those are going to be public documents ultimately, and also just help to shape the conversation, shape the language, make sure we are in alignment with a decolonizing frame. So I think that's number one. And I even think like tonight, depending on how quick we get through this, like I know that the medical group had specifically sought out and said in the last conversation, because I was with them last time, they were like, we got like some of our stuff flowing, we've got our ideas, but we want to check in with the decolonizing group and make sure we're still on point. And I think we should like do that tonight and just begin that kind of conversation. And I'm gonna be real, like Shauna, I don't know quite what that looks like. But I think that through the magic of people meeting and talking together, we'll figure something out, and it'll be good. And I trust.
I can share some of the thoughts. I don't want to cut you off, but I also know I'm about to get in the car, and I don't know if my car is gonna let me still see y'all or not. We'll see. But one of the things that like was rolling around in my mind was sort of like an embedded way where folks could request time with us specifically, since we might be
Hey, we lost you.
So I'll try to pick up where Shauna kind of left off. It almost sounds like we'd be an ombudsman to an extent of the work that happens with the task force. So think of what we are doing as kind of laying your conceptual framework. Any policies, any actions, any programs, anything that comes out of this body must be with the framework of decolonization. And I think where we want to position ourselves as a committee would be among those, and not only solely, because we don't want to consolidate that kind of power and influence, but we want to certainly provide guidance on how anything that is produced from this task force is with that framework, because we are explicitly, and that part is important, explicitly saying we want to operate within that framework.
Gotcha. I see you moving around, but you were saying that folks could like sign up a time to get
sign up in time, and maybe even a way for folks to be able to upload like a video. You can drive, Brian. Maybe even a way to upload like a video, because sometimes these kinds of challenges are harder to write than they are to be able to articulate. And so we're gonna get food, Imar. So perhaps there'll be a way to have like a Google form of sorts where folks can upload their needs. And then as we're having our continued meetings, we can just make a part of our meetings trying to support, to address it. Because I know I won't be able to commit to adding other time outside of the time that we meet as a committee. But like if it's a line item on our agenda each time that we meet, it could be building these tools that we have and then looking at some of the needs of the committee, and that might be able to inform what we need to address in the development of our tools as it is. Because one of our ultimate agendas as it stands is to create a toolkit, right? And so I also think that it could be helpful, right? That we're getting some of the questions and challenges that other task force members are having, and then we're able to adjust the way that we create our toolkit based off of the kinds of challenges that we know folks are having or questions that they're having as they're going along. So I hope y'all can hear all of that.
Yeah, no, that was remarkably clear for driving in a car. Good Wi-Fi. Yeah, okay. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, and so the deliverable is both the toolkit and also the sort of coaching consultation with the other subcommittees.
I think
yes, and sorry.
I'm sorry. I was also thinking it's sort of an evaluation, right, of the work that comes out. So if we think about it as an evaluation, it isn't so much like a gatekeeping process, more of a ensuring that this checklist of things is present so that we are moving in the model that we say we would.
Gotcha. I think I just have one quick thought, kind of trying to wrap my head around all your comments and agreeing with Shauna, like the time is so limited, we cannot add more hours to the committee. It has already been very tight to even work together on the goals. And, I just brought up the goals because I was reviewing thoroughly and trying to understand what we're trying to accomplish there. And then adding, if we want to be mindful of the impact that we're trying to make in the decision-making process of all the subcommittees, it is going to take more time. So I think we may need to reflect on what exactly is that we are trying to accomplish. And again, I'm agreeing with you all in the sense of like the decolonization has to be present in all the decisions and all the policies and all the recommendations from all the subcommittees. But I'm just trying to understand what's the strategy that we're trying to incorporate? How are we reframing the work of our subcommittee to make sure that we make an impact? Because also rushing things is not going to help, and just
I think that's a good point, Monica. I wonder, Zeke, if you could speak to like what, as we're imagining our timeline, because it might be like every other month is a time where we can assess 1 to 2 inquiries, but the other time is where we spend working on this thing. But that only makes sense depending on the format of what we hope or think that these sort of work sessions will look like in general.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you all can provide me/us with like, what do those sessions look like? Like how long, like what's, you mentioned, Jasmine, like evaluations, like what the rubric kind of looks like, or like what that didactic or back and forth kind of looks like. I think then we could plug in and figure out like, okay, let's take 35 minutes at the next one to go meet with such and such group, and then spend time working on your toolkit. And then let's spend, another 35 minutes. So like, yeah, I mean, I don't feel like super pressed or rushed to get things done. I think especially with this kind of work, it's more about like quality, not like we gotta get it done. So I think, I wouldn't stress too much about if it draws out a little bit. The other thing I was just gonna throw out there, just as like an opportunity, I think for this group, one of the things that the youth group has started envisioning and thinking about is some kind of collective institute between the 3 schools of social work, Morgan, Maryland, and Coppin, around what it means to be a social worker in Baltimore, both for the goal of being better able to serve young people, families, et cetera, here, and also as a way to hopefully keep folks here, and just deepen the cultural appreciation and understanding of our city. And the idea is for students to be co-learning together, faculty to be sometimes working together. I think it's a really cool idea. A bunch of faculty from the different schools are pretty into it. But all that to say, I think there's an opportunity for your group to, again, whether it's evaluate, consult, or just like help to shape some of what that looks like, from a decolonizing lens. I think, again, that could be really helpful and something that would have a really big impact.
I think that idea is so necessary, and I am here for what the young people are saying. I think it's important to note that we are still, once our plan is solidified, and this will help us solidify it, a lot of time will be spent creating the rubric based off of our own collective learning process. Some of us are more familiar with the ideas around decolonization than others. And so it will be some time before we actually have this established rubric, because that is one of our deliverables. So I think it's fair to say, and I'm wondering if what the rest of the team thinks about this as well, is, I think it's a good idea to think of this as a gradual process, but recognizing that we're going to prioritize the creation of the tools, and we'll have to create some boundaries around the availability that we have. My child in the background is making sure y'all hear her.
Yeah, I was thinking that too, because even like in terms of an evaluation, what is exactly that we're trying to evaluate? Is it the outcomes that they are proposing? Is it the goals, or is it the entire, are we going to start from the statement of purpose that they are writing, and then reviewing their development process? I think the rubric in itself is a toolkit too for each of the subcommittees, where they incorporate their areas of expertise or areas of focus. So I want to be very careful to not just say, sure, come to us, bring us 4 things, and we will tell you A, B, and C, because I don't think this conversation is black or white. It's not. There are like shades of gray in between, and even for ourselves, it took some time to be kind of on the same page about what we're talking. And sorry, I'm not trying to make things complicated. I'm just trying to like think realistically, what is the ask and what can be offered and how can we collaborate with the others. So I don't know if there's there's a plan B, an alternative where we can share the work that we're doing and they can review it and see if that matches somehow with what they are doing. Sorry, just thinking out loud.
I didn't think that you were making it complicated. I think that you helping us get it clear. My initial reaction to that is maybe it's that we first have the chance to finish our rubric and then people can come talk to us after they review it, you know? I often it's making me think that maybe we shouldn't be meeting with anyone today because we aren't really clear about how we can offer other support and because I don't know how many minutes we have left. It looks like we have 3.
I agree with you, Shauna, but I also think that hearing the questions at least from the group that's here could help inform the rubric, right? Like, because right now it's kind of a big umbrella of how we could provide something. So even if I don't think we have time like right now, but if like emails of questions right now could maybe help us like inform where we could at least get started on a rubric, because right now I think we
create the form, y'all. I can create a form because I have a template. We can create the form and ask them to fill it out.
That could be a good start. And then we can set a timeline for if we're gonna build a rubric, like what that timeline would realistically look like. That will also work in conjunction with the timelines of the other committees and what they want to accomplish.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think this is going to be a little fluid. And so we're always going to go with the flow and no stress because it's going to be multiple things happening simultaneously. And I'll be okay. 2, I think, it might be helpful to like just for you all as well as for other groups to like even have that first conversation just to like hone in on what people are asking and how you all want to think about it. I sort of agree with Jasmine. And then I think give you some time to work on your rubric and then develop how you want to like parse through other groups' work. And again, I don't feel the need to present all this publicly until when, Ann? Am I supposed to present this publicly?
You don't report to the city council until I think it's like June. March is when agencies are supposed to be reporting into the task force. Then the task force is reporting out to the city council in June.
So, deep breath. We got a while. It does not need to be like get it all out. But so does that sound right in terms of, do you all want to have like a brief conversation with the medical group for even 10, 15 minutes at the next meeting and then go back and do some work? Does that seem right?
I want to send a link to you and Ann that they can send and they can fill it out. And it can be a recording, it could be a whatever. That's what I want, but I'm wondering what other folks think.
I'm open to the format of the exchange.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, same here.
Okay, great. So send us a link. We will send it over to the medical group. Hopefully they'll get a chance to look at it. And then.
And if not, then we'll meet for 10 minutes, whatever.
Cool. All right. 7:01. Shauna, good luck with your dad.
Good luck.
Text us, let us know you're all right. And yeah, send us a link. We'll send it over. We'll go from there.
Thank you. All right, y'all. I'll send the link to y'all so you can see the form, and then we can share it out to Z.
Cool. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
See ya.